When I found that photograph tucked inside my late husband's Bible, my world shattered in an instant. But what I discovered next about my own son made me take action that would tear our family apart forever. I'm glad you're here to listen. Follow my story to the end and comment what country you're watching from so I can see how far this reaches. At 70 years old, I thought I'd seen every kind of heartbreak life could deliver. I'd buried my beloved husband Gerald just 8 months ago after 47 years of marriage. The grief was still raw, still present in every corner of our old Victorian house in Ashford Springs, a small town nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I was about to discover on that crisp autumn morning. My name is Beatrice Thornhill, though everyone calls me Bea. This is the story of how a single photograph hidden in a holy book destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family, my marriage, and my son. It started on a Tuesday morning in late October. The dogwood trees outside were ablaze with crimson leaves, and a gentle mist hung over the mountains like a veil. I'd woken early, as I always did since Gerald's passing. Sleep had become elusive, a fickle companion that abandoned me in the darkest hours of the night. I made my coffee in the old percolator Gerald had insisted on keeping despite my suggestions to upgrade to something more modern. The familiar gurgling sound filled the kitchen, and for a moment, I could almost pretend he was still upstairs, getting ready for his morning walk through the garden. But he wasn't. He'd never walk through that garden again. Gerald had been the center of my world for nearly 5 decades. We'd met at a church social when I was just 21. Fresh out of nursing school and full of dreams about the life I wanted to build. He'd been 25, already working as an accountant at Mercer & Sons, wearing a slightly too large suit and the kindest smile I'd ever seen. Our courtship had been traditional, proper. Sunday dinners with both families, chaperone dates to the cinema, long walks through Riverside Park where he'd finally worked up the courage to kiss me beneath the old oak tree. We were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at Cornerstone Baptist Church, the same church where we'd raise our children and spend countless Sundays worshiping together. Gerald had been a man of deep faith. His Bible was his most treasured possession, more valuable to him than any material wealth. It was a beautiful leather-bound King James version that his grandmother had given him on his 16th birthday, with his name embossed in gold letters on the cover, Gerald Thomas Thornhill. After his death from pancreatic cancer, a brutal, swift disease that took him from diagnosis to grave in just 4 months, I hadn't been able to bring myself to touch his personal belongings. His reading glasses still sat on the nightstand. His slippers remained by the bed. His Bible rested on the small table in his study, exactly where he'd left it the last time he'd been strong enough to read. But 8 months had passed, and my daughter-in-law Vanessa had gently suggested it might be time to start going through some of his things. Not to forget him, she'd said kindly, but to honor his memory by deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to pass down to our grandchildren. Vanessa was like that, thoughtful, compassionate, always knowing the right thing to say. She'd been married to my son Preston for 19 years, and I couldn't have asked for a better daughter-in-law. She'd been the one who sat with me during Gerald's final days when Preston was always too busy with work. She'd held my hand during the funeral when I thought I might collapse from the weight of my grief. That Tuesday morning, I decided Vanessa was right. It was time. I carried my coffee into Gerald's study, a small room at the back of the house with built-in bookshelves and a large window overlooking the garden. The morning sun was just beginning to burn through the mist, casting everything in a soft, golden light. The room still smelled like him, Old Spice aftershave, leather, and the faint scent of the pipe tobacco he'd given up years ago but whose aroma had permanently infused the wood paneling. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, just breathing it in, feeling the familiar ache in my chest. Gerald's desk was exactly as he'd left it. Neat, organized, everything in its proper place. He'd been meticulous that way, a trait he'd carried from his accounting work into every aspect of his life. Bills were filed alphabetically. Books were arranged by category and then by author's last name. Even his pens were lined up in a precise row in their holder. I set my coffee down and began slowly, touching each item like it was made of glass. A letter opener from his father. A paperweight from our 20th anniversary trip to Savannah. A framed photograph of our family taken 15 years ago, Preston, Vanessa, and their twin daughters Lily and Rose, who'd been just 5 years old then, gap-toothed and giggling. And there, in the center of the desk, was Gerald's Bible. My hand trembled as I reached for it. The leather was worn soft from decades of use, the pages edged in gold leaf that had dulled with time. Gerald had read this Bible every single night before bed, without fail, for as long as I'd known him. It was part of his routine, as essential as breathing. I lifted it carefully, cradling it in both hands. It was heavier than I remembered, substantial in a way that spoke to its importance. I brought it close to my face and breathed in. The pages smelled like old paper and Gerald's fingerprints, if such a thing were possible. I opened it to a random page, somewhere in Psalms, and saw Gerald's neat handwriting in the margins. Little notes he'd made to himself over the years. Verses that had spoken to him during difficult times. Dates marking important moments in our lives. My eyes filled with tears as I flipped through the pages, seeing his life documented in tiny script. Our wedding date next to 1 Corinthians 13. Preston's birth date next to Psalm 127. The date we'd moved into this house next to Proverbs 24 verse 3. I was about to close the Bible, overwhelmed with emotion, when something fell out from between the pages. A photograph. It fluttered to the hardwood floor and landed face down at my feet. I stared at it for a moment, confused. Gerald kept all our family photos in albums, meticulously organized and labeled. He wouldn't have just stuck a loose photograph in his Bible. Unless it was something he wanted to keep private. Something he didn't want anyone else to see. My heart began to beat faster as I bent down to pick it up. My knees protested. Arthritis had been worsening lately, but I managed to grasp it between my fingers. I turned it over. The world tilted. The photograph showed a woman I recognized immediately, though I wished with every fiber of my being that I didn't. She was young, perhaps in her early 30s, with cascading auburn hair that fell past her shoulders in perfect waves. She had striking green eyes, full lips curved in a knowing smile, and she was lounging on what appeared to be a hotel bed, wearing nothing but a black silk robe that had fallen open to reveal far more than was appropriate. But it wasn't the provocative pose that made my stomach turn. It was the woman herself. Sienna Whitmore. The woman my son Preston had introduced to our family about 9 months ago. The woman he claimed was his business associate in his real estate development company. The woman who'd been coming to our Sunday family dinners with increasing frequency. The woman who'd brought flowers to Gerald's funeral and held my hand and told me how sorry she was for my loss. I sank into Gerald's desk chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. The photograph trembled in my hands as I stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Why would my husband have a provocative photograph of my son's business partner hidden in his Bible? With shaking fingers, I turned the photo over. Written on the back in looping, feminine handwriting were words that made my blood run cold. To my darling G, until we meet again in our secret place. The eternal flame burns only for you. Forever yours, S.W. G. Gerald. S.W. Sienna Whitmore. I read the message 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Something innocent. Something explainable. But there was no innocent explanation for this. My 75-year-old husband, who'd been dead for 8 months, had been having an affair. With a woman who was now involved with our son. A woman young enough to be his granddaughter. The room began to spin. I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to steady myself, trying to breathe through the tightness in my chest. Was I having a heart attack? It felt like one. Like something vital inside me was breaking apart. Secret place. What secret place? When had this been happening? How long had it been going on? I forced myself to think through the timeline. Sienna had first appeared in our lives around January of this year. Preston had brought her to Sunday dinner, introducing her as his new business partner. He'd explained that they'd met at a real estate investment seminar in Charlotte and had decided to partner on some commercial development projects. Vanessa had seemed uncomfortable with the arrangement from the start. I remembered her pulling me aside in the kitchen that first evening, her voice low and worried. "Preston's spending an awful lot of time with that woman," she'd said. "Late nights at the office. Weekend meetings. Business trips that last 3 or 4 days." I'd tried to reassure her. "Preston's always been ambitious, dear. You know how he gets when he's working on a big project." But Vanessa's eyes had been filled with doubt. "This feels different, B. The way he talks about her. The way he lights up when she calls. I think there might be something going on." I dismissed her concerns as paranoia, as the natural insecurity of a wife whose husband was working closely with an attractive woman. I'd told her she had nothing to worry about, that Preston loved her and the girls, that he would never jeopardize his marriage. Now, staring at this photograph, I realized Vanessa had been right to worry. But the affair she'd suspected wasn't between Preston and Sienna. It was between Gerald and Sienna. Unless... A new, even more horrifying thought struck me. What if it wasn't either/or? What if it was both? What if Sienna had been involved with my husband and my son? I pressed my hand to my mouth, fighting the wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm me. No. That was impossible. Too twisted, too depraved, even for the worst kind of person. But the evidence was literally in my hands. I stood up abruptly, needing to move, needing to do something with the horrible energy coursing through my body. I paced around the study, the photograph clutched in my hand, my mind racing through the past year. Gerald had gotten sick in February. The diagnosis had come suddenly, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, already spread to his liver. The doctors had given him 3 to 6 months. He'd lived for 4. During those 4 months, Sienna had become increasingly present in our lives. She'd come to Sunday dinners every week. She'd visited Gerald during his illness, bringing him books and magazines, sitting with him when I needed to run errands or take a break from the constant caregiving. I'd thought she was being kind. I'd thought she was a good person, supporting her business partner's family during a difficult time. But she hadn't been being kind. She'd been maintaining her affair with my dying husband. The cruelty of it was staggering. She'd sat in my living room, drunk my coffee, eaten my food, all while carrying on a secret relationship with Gerald. She'd probably laughed about it later, about how foolish the old wife was, how easy it was to deceive her. And Preston? Where did he fit into all this? Did he know? Was he involved somehow? Or was he another victim of Sienna's manipulation? I needed to know more. I needed to understand the full scope of this betrayal. I turned back to Gerald's desk and began searching through the drawers with new purpose. If he'd kept this photograph, he might have kept other evidence. Letters, perhaps. Emails. Something that would help me understand what had happened. The top drawer contained the usual office supplies, pens, paper clips, sticky notes. The second drawer held files related to our finances, all neatly labeled and organized. But when I opened the bottom drawer, I found something unexpected. A small wooden box, about the size of a shoebox, tucked in the back corner beneath some old tax returns. I pulled it out and set it on the desk. It was made of cherry wood, with a small brass clasp. I didn't recognize it. Gerald must have kept it hidden, something he didn't want me to find. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly work the clasp, but finally it clicked open. Inside were more photographs. At least 24 of them, all of Sienna in various states of undress, in different locations. Hotel rooms, mostly, but some appeared to be taken in a cabin somewhere, rustic wood walls, a stone fireplace, a bed covered in a colorful quilt. There were also receipts. Hotel charges from the Grandview Inn, a bed and breakfast about 30 miles away in Copper Ridge. Restaurant bills from La Maison Rouge, an expensive French restaurant in the city. Receipts for jewelry from Cartier, flowers from Rosewood Florist, wine from premium vintners. I rifled through them with growing horror. The dates spanned from last January all the way through May, just a month before Gerald's death. He'd been having this affair for nearly 6 months. He'd been spending our money, our retirement savings, on this woman while I sat at home, faithful and devoted, caring for our home and planning for our golden years together. At the bottom of the box, beneath all the receipts and photographs, was a stack of letters. They were written on expensive cream-colored stationery, the same looping handwriting from the photograph. My darling G, the first one began. Last night was magical. When I'm in your arms, I forget about everything else, the age difference, the complications, the secrecy. You make me feel alive in a way I've never experienced before. I couldn't read anymore. I dropped the letter like it had burned me. This wasn't just a casual affair. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a midlife crisis. This had been a full relationship, with feelings and intimacy and plans for the future. Gerald hadn't just betrayed me. He'd built an entire secret life. I don't know how long I sat there, surrounded by evidence of my husband's infidelity. Time seemed to have stopped. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, and the mist had burned away, leaving the autumn day bright and clear. But inside Gerald's study, inside my heart, everything was dark. Finally, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked out the window and saw Preston's black Audi. My son was here. I quickly gathered all the photographs, receipts, and letters and shoved them back into the wooden box. Then I hid it in the bottom drawer again, beneath the tax returns. I needed time to think, to process, to figure out what to do with this information before confronting anyone. The front door opened. Mom? You here? Preston's voice echoed through the house. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself, trying to hide the devastation I knew must be written all over my face. In your father's study, I called back, surprised at how normal my voice sounded. Footsteps approached, and then Preston appeared in the doorway. At 45, my son was the image of what Gerald had looked like in his prime, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair just beginning to gray at the temples. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and his shoes were polished to a mirror shine. Preston had always been ambitious, always reaching for more. He'd started his real estate development company 15 years ago with a small loan from Gerald and had built it into one of the most successful firms in the region. He drove a luxury car, lived in a sprawling house in the wealthy Oakmont neighborhood, sent his daughters to private schools. Looking at him now, I wondered how well I really knew him. I'd thought I knew Gerald, and look how wrong I'd been about that. Hey, Mom. Preston kissed my cheek, his cologne expensive and overwhelming. How are you doing? Vanessa mentioned you were thinking about going through Dad's things. Yes, I said carefully. I thought it was time. He glanced around the study, his gaze lingering on Gerald's Bible, which I'd left open on the desk. Must be hard, going through all his stuff. Finding memories everywhere. Memories, I repeated. Yes. Quite a few of those. Preston seemed to sense something in my tone. His eyes narrowed slightly. Everything okay, Mom? You seem off. I'm fine. Just emotional, you know. It's difficult being in here, surrounded by your father's things. He nodded sympathetically, but I could see he didn't quite believe me. Preston had always been perceptive, able to read people. It's what made him so successful in business. Listen, Mom, I actually came by to invite you to dinner on Saturday night. We're celebrating. Sienna and I just closed on the Riverside Plaza development. It's the biggest deal we've ever done. We want to celebrate with family. Sienna. Of course she'd be there. That sounds lovely, I heard myself say. Will it be at your house? Actually, we're doing it at Bellissimo's. That new Italian place downtown. Vanessa's been wanting to try it. Vanessa. My sweet, faithful daughter-in-law who'd worried from the beginning that something wasn't right about Preston's relationship with Sienna. Will Sienna be there? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Of course. She's my business partner. We're celebrating our success together. Preston smiled, but there was something guarded in his expression. You like Sienna, don't you, Mom? I know she was really helpful during Dad's illness. Helpful. That was one word for it. Yes, I said slowly. She was certainly present during that time. She thought the world of Dad. She was really broken up about his death. The audacity of it took my breath away. Preston actually believed Sienna had been mourning Gerald out of simple kindness, not because she'd been sleeping with him. Unless Preston knew exactly what Sienna's relationship with Gerald had been. I studied my son's face, looking for any sign of knowledge, any hint of guilt. But I saw nothing except pride in his business success and perhaps a touch of concern for his grieving mother. Saturday at 7, Preston continued. The girls are coming too. They're so excited to go to a fancy restaurant. You know how Lily and Rose are, they love getting dressed up. My granddaughters. Sweet 16-year-old girls who had no idea their family was built on lies and betrayal. I'll be there, I promised. After Preston left, I returned to the bottom drawer and pulled out the wooden box again. I spent the rest of the day going through every piece of evidence, reading every letter, studying every photograph, making a timeline of the affair. What emerged was a picture of systematic deception that had lasted from January through May. Gerald had been meeting Sienna at least twice a week, sometimes more. They'd had a regular room at the Grandview Inn. They'd called each other pet names. He was her silver fox, she was his eternal flame. The letters revealed that Gerald had been planning to leave me. He'd told Sienna that after his retirement, planned for that coming September, he was going to ask me for a divorce. He'd promised to marry her, to build a new life with her, to make up for all the years she'd been trapped in relationships with men her own age who didn't understand her. But then he'd gotten sick. The last letter in the box was dated early May, just a few weeks before Gerald's death. It was different from the others, shorter, more desperate. My dearest G, I know the doctors say there's no hope, but I refuse to believe it. You're going to beat this. You have to. We have so many plans, so many dreams yet to live. I can't imagine a world without you in it. Please keep fighting. Please don't leave me. Your eternal flame, S. I stared at that letter for a long time, trying to understand the woman who'd written it. Had she really loved Gerald? Or had she been after his money, his connections, the comfortable life he could provide? And how did Preston fit into all of this? The timeline showed that Sienna had met Preston around the same time she'd started her affair with Gerald. Had that been a coincidence? Or had she targeted our family deliberately, worming her way into both relationships? One thing was certain, I couldn't let this Saturday dinner happen without knowing the full truth. I needed to understand exactly what Sienna Whitmore was, what she wanted, and how deep her manipulation of my family went. That night, I barely slept. I lay in the bed I'd shared with Gerald for 47 years, staring at the ceiling, my mind churning with questions and anger and a grief that went deeper than anything I'd felt when he'd actually died. Because this was a different kind of loss. I wasn't just grieving the man I'd loved. I was grieving the marriage I'd thought we had, the life I'd thought we'd live together, the person I'd believed Gerald to be. Every memory was now tainted. Every tender moment potentially a lie. Had he been thinking of her when he kissed me? Had he been counting down the days until he could leave me for his eternal flame? By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront anyone yet. I wasn't going to show my hand. Instead, I was going to do what Gerald had done, keep secrets, gather information, and wait for exactly the right moment to reveal the truth. Because one thing was absolutely certain. If Sienna Whitmore thought she was going to destroy my family without consequences, she was very, very wrong. I was 70 years old, recently widowed, and supposedly a helpless old woman who could be easily fooled and forgotten. But I was about to show everyone exactly how wrong they were about that. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The shock and devastation of the previous day had crystallized overnight into something harder, colder. Purpose. I wasn't going to be a victim. I wasn't going to curl up and accept this betrayal passively. If my husband had lived a double life, if this woman had manipulated my family, if my son was somehow involved in all of this, I was going to find out every detail. And then I was going to decide what to do about it. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, something Gerald had always used when he needed to organize his thoughts. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was using his method to unravel his secrets. At the top of the page, I wrote, "What I know." Beneath it, I listed the facts. Gerald had an affair with Sienna Whitmore from approximately January to May, 6 months. The affair was serious. Gerald planned to divorce me and marry her. They met regularly at the Grandview Inn in Copper Ridge. Gerald spent significant money on her, jewelry, dinners, gifts. Sienna appeared in Preston's life around the same time, January. Sienna is now Preston's business partner. Vanessa suspects Preston and Sienna are having an affair. Gerald died in June, 3 months after his diagnosis. Sienna has continued coming to family dinners and events. Saturday dinner is supposedly to celebrate a business deal. Then I started a new list, what I don't know. How did Sienna and Gerald meet? Did Preston know about Gerald and Sienna? Is Preston also involved with Sienna romantically? What does Sienna want from our family? Are there financial implications I don't know about? Who else knew about the affair? What was Sienna's role during Gerald's final illness? Why did she stay involved with the family after Gerald died? The questions multiplied the more I thought about them. Each answer would likely lead to 10 more questions. But I had to start somewhere. I decided my first step would be the Grandview Inn. If Gerald and Sienna had been meeting there regularly for 6 months, someone at the hotel would remember them. Small-town establishments always had staff who paid attention, who noticed patterns, who remembered faces. I got dressed carefully, choosing a simple navy dress and my good wool coat. I wanted to look respectable, like someone the hotel staff would trust and want to help. I pulled my silver hair back into a neat bun and applied a touch of lipstick, something I hadn't bothered with since Gerald's funeral. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized. The past 8 months had aged me. There were new lines around my eyes, a hollowness in my cheeks, a heaviness in my expression that hadn't been there before. Grief had changed me physically. But discovering Gerald's betrayal had changed something else. There was a hardness in my eyes now, a determination that surprised even me. The drive to Copper Ridge took about 40 minutes through winding mountain roads. The autumn colors were at their peak, brilliant reds and oranges and golds painting the hillsides. Gerald had always loved this drive. We'd taken it often over the years, heading up to the mountains for weekend getaways or leaf-peeping tours. Now I wondered how many times he'd driven this same route to meet her. How many times had he lied about where he was going? Just running errands, meeting a client. Going to check on that property we're thinking of buying. Had I been so trusting that I'd never questioned him? Or had I simply not wanted to see the truth? The Grandview Inn sat on a hillside overlooking Copper Ridge, a charming 3-story Victorian building painted cream and forest green. It had a wide wraparound porch with white rocking chairs, flower boxes that were now filled with autumn mums, and a sign advertising romantic getaway packages and Mountain View suites. Of course Gerald would bring her here. It was beautiful, private, and far enough from Ashford Springs that they were unlikely to run into anyone we knew. I parked in the small lot and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. What was I going to say? I couldn't just walk in and announce that my late husband had been having an affair here. I needed to be subtle, strategic. The lobby was exactly what I expected, decorated in country Victorian style with floral wallpaper, overstuffed furniture, and lace curtains. A fire crackled in a large stone fireplace, and classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Behind the front desk stood a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and reading glasses perched on her nose. Her name tag read, Donna, manager. Good morning, she greeted me with a warm smile. Welcome to the Grandview Inn. Do you have a reservation? No, I'm afraid not. I approached the desk, clutching my purse. Actually, I was hoping you might be able to help me with something. It's rather sensitive. Donna's expression shifted to concern. Of course. What can I do for you? I took a breath. My husband passed away a few months ago. Gerald Thornhill. I'm trying to settle his affairs, and I found several receipts from your establishment in his records. I wanted to verify the charges, make sure everything is in order for tax purposes. It was a plausible lie. Widows often had to deal with confusing financial records after their husbands died. Donna's face softened with sympathy. I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Thornhill. Let me pull up our records. She turned to her computer and began typing. What was your husband's first name again? Gerald. Gerald Thomas Thornhill. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, then stopped. She stared at the screen, and I watched her expression change, a flicker of recognition, followed by what looked like discomfort. Yes, she said slowly. Mr. Thornhill was a guest here multiple times between January and May of this year. Multiple times? I kept my voice neutral, curious but not suspicious. Quite a few visits, actually. Usually the same room, our sunset suite. It's one of our nicest rooms, with a king bed and a private balcony overlooking the mountains. Of course he'd gotten the nicest room. Nothing but the best for his eternal flame. I see. I paused, as if confused. That's odd. Gerald never mentioned staying here. I thought maybe the charges were business-related, but he never traveled for work. Donna shifted uncomfortably. Well, perhaps I shouldn't say anything. Guest privacy and all. Please, I said, letting a little tremor enter my voice. Gerald is gone now. I'm just trying to understand his final months. If there's something I should know. She hesitated, clearly debating with herself. Then she leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice even though we were alone in the lobby. Mrs. Thornhill, your husband always checked in with a young woman. She had red hair, very pretty. They came every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, stayed for a few hours. Sometimes they'd have dinner in our restaurant. They seemed very close. The confirmation hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd already known the truth. Hearing it spoken aloud by a stranger made it more real somehow. I see, I managed. Did you ever speak with them? Do you remember anything about the woman? Donna looked torn. I probably shouldn't. Please, I interrupted. I need to know. Gerald was everything to me. If he had someone else in his life, I deserved to understand what happened. She sighed, her resistance crumbling. She was always very friendly with the staff. Generous with tips. She called him pet names, honey, darling, things like that. And he looked at her like a man in love. Like a man in love. With someone who wasn't his wife of 47 years. Do you know her name? I asked. I'm sorry, I don't. She never checked in, Mr. Thornhill always handled the reservations and payment. But she drove a white BMW. I noticed because it's a nice car. A white BMW. I made a mental note to check if that matched what Sienna drove. One more thing, I said. The last time they were here, do you remember when that was? Donna checked her computer. May 14th. That was their final visit. May 14th. Just 3 weeks before Gerald died. He'd been sick by then, already losing weight, already weakening. But still strong enough to drive up here for one last afternoon with his mistress. Thank you, I said quietly. You've been very helpful. Mrs. Thornhill, Donna said as I turned to leave. I'm sorry. I remember thinking at the time that your husband seemed like a good man, very polite and respectful to the staff. It's just complicated, I suppose. Yes, I agreed. Very complicated. I walked back to my car on shaking legs and sat behind the wheel for several minutes, breathing deeply, trying to process what I'd learned. The affair was confirmed. The timeline was clearer. And now I knew they'd been here until just weeks before his death. But I still didn't understand how it had started or what Sienna's endgame was. My next stop was the public library in Ashford Springs. I needed to research Sienna Whitmore, who she was, where she came from, what kind of person could seduce a dying man and then insinuate herself into his family? The library was quiet on a Wednesday morning, just a few patrons browsing the shelves and one young mother reading to her toddler in the children's section. I headed straight for the computer terminals and opened up a search engine. I typed in Sienna Whitmore. The results were surprisingly limited. There was a LinkedIn profile for a Sienna Whitmore showing her as a real estate investment specialist with Preston's company, Thornhill Development Group. The profile picture showed her in professional attire, her auburn hair pulled back, her green eyes staring confidently at the camera. According to the profile, she'd graduated from somewhere called Westmont College in South Carolina with a degree in business. She'd worked for several different companies over the past 10 years, a bank in Charlotte, a property management firm in Raleigh, a real estate agency in Charleston. I clicked through to her Facebook page, which was set to public. It was exactly what I'd expect from someone trying to project success and sophistication. Photos of her at fancy restaurants, at business conferences, at charity galas. Pictures with Preston at various work events, both of them smiling professionally. But there were no personal photos. No family pictures, no old friends, no glimpses into her life before she'd appeared in Ashford Springs. It was as if Sienna Whitmore had simply materialized fully formed in January of this year, with no past, no history, no roots. I scrolled back through her timeline, looking for anything that might give me insight into who she really was. Most of her posts were about real estate, market trends, investment opportunities, celebration of closed deals. Then I found something interesting. A post from last December, just before she'd entered our lives. New year, new opportunities. Excited to be starting fresh in the beautiful town of Ashford Springs. Sometimes you need to leave the past behind and build something new. Here's to new beginnings. Clinking glasses. Starting fresh. Leaving the past behind. The words felt significant, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. I continued searching, trying different variations of her name, checking news articles, court records, anything that might reveal more about her background. But there was nothing. Sienna Whitmore was either incredibly private or incredibly careful about her digital footprint. Then I tried a different approach. I searched for Westmont College, South Carolina. No results. The college didn't exist. I tried various spellings, Westmount, Westman, Westmont, but nothing came up. Either I'd read the college name wrong on her LinkedIn profile, or she'd lied about her education. I went back to LinkedIn and looked more carefully. No, it definitely said Westmont College. A college that didn't exist. My pulse quickened. If she'd lied about her education, what else had she lied about? I spent the next 2 hours digging deeper, cross-referencing the companies she claimed to have worked for, checking business registries, searching for any verifiable information about Sienna Whitmore's past. What I found, or rather, didn't find, was chilling. The bank she claimed to have worked for in Charlotte had no record of a Sienna Whitmore in their employment history. I called, pretending to be verifying references for a job application, and they told me they'd never heard of her. The property management firm in Raleigh had gone out of business 3 years ago, making it impossible to verify her employment there. The real estate agency in Charleston did exist, but when I called them, the receptionist said they had no former employee by that name. Sienna Whitmore's entire professional history appeared to be fabricated. I sat back in my chair, staring at the computer screen, my mind racing. Who was this woman? If everything about her background was a lie, then what was real? And more importantly, what had she wanted from Gerald? From Preston? From our family? I needed to talk to someone who might have more insight. Someone who'd been watching Preston and Sienna's relationship from the beginning with suspicious eyes. I needed to talk to Vanessa. I called my daughter-in-law from the library parking lot. B. Vanessa's voice was warm with surprise. Is everything okay? Yes, dear. I was wondering if you might have time for lunch today. I'd love to see you. There was a pause. Of course. Is something wrong? You sound different. I just need to talk. Can you meet me at Rosemary's Cafe? Say, around noon? I'll be there. Rosemary's Cafe was a cozy little restaurant on Main Street, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and gossip flowed as freely as the sweet tea. I arrived early and chose a corner booth in the back, away from curious ears. Vanessa showed up right at noon, looking professional in dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater. At 44, she was still beautiful, soft brown hair, kind hazel eyes, a gentle smile that had always made me glad Preston had married her. She slid into the booth across from me, concern written all over her face. "B, what's going on? You've got me worried." I'd spent the drive over trying to figure out how to start this conversation. How do you tell your daughter-in-law that her husband's business partner was sleeping with her father-in-law? That the woman she'd suspected of having an affair with her husband might actually be something much more complicated and sinister? "Vanessa, I need to ask you some questions about Sienna Whitmore. And I need you to be completely honest with me, even if you think it might hurt my feelings." Her eyes widened slightly. "Okay. When did Preston first meet her? Do you remember exactly?" Vanessa thought for a moment. "It was early January, I think. He came home from that real estate conference in Charlotte, you remember. He was gone for 3 days, and he was excited about this new business contact he'd made. Said she had connections with investors, that she could help him land bigger deals." "And when did she start coming around the house? To family dinners?" "Almost immediately. Preston invited her to Sunday dinner the next week. I thought it was odd, inviting a business associate to a family dinner so quickly, but Preston said she was new in town and didn't know anyone. He felt sorry for her." I nodded, filing away this information. "And your impression of her at that first dinner?" Vanessa bit her lip. "Honestly, I didn't like her. There was something off about her. She was too friendly, too interested in everyone. She asked a million questions about the family, about Preston's childhood, about you and Gerald. I thought maybe she was just nervous, trying to make a good impression, but it felt intrusive." "What kind of questions did she ask about Gerald?" "Everything. What he did for work, how long you'd been married, what his interests were. She seemed particularly interested when I mentioned he was a deacon at the church. She said something about loving men of faith, that they were so rare these days." My stomach turned. She'd been targeting him from the very beginning. "Vanessa," I said carefully, "do you think Preston and Sienna are having an affair?" She looked down at her hands, twisted together on the table. "I don't know. I've suspected it for months. He's distant, always on his phone, working late every night. They take business trips together, overnight trips to Charlotte, Atlanta, even Nashville once. He says it's all work, but..." She looked up at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But I feel like I'm losing him, B. Like he's already gone and I'm just the last to know." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I need to tell you something. Something I discovered yesterday. But it's going to be difficult to hear." Her face paled. "What is it?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. About finding the photograph in Gerald's Bible. About the hidden box with letters and receipts. About the affair that had lasted for 6 months, right up until Gerald's death. About the lies Sienna had told about her background. About my suspicions that she'd been manipulating our entire family. Vanessa listened in stunned silence, her face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, she just stared at me, her mouth slightly open. "Gerald," she finally whispered. "Gerald and Sienna? But he was, and she's so young. I don't understand." "Neither do I, completely. But I'm trying to figure it out. Vanessa, I need your help. I need to know what you've observed about Preston and Sienna's relationship. Everything you can remember." She nodded slowly, still processing. Okay. She took a shaky breath. "They're together constantly. She's at the office every day. They have lunch together most days. And Preston talks about her all the time. Sienna thinks this or Sienna suggested that. It's like she's become the center of his world. Has he spent money on her? Gifts, dinners, anything unusual? I don't know for sure, but our bank account has been strange lately. Preston handles most of the finances, but I've noticed larger withdrawals than usual. When I asked about it, he said it was business expenses, investments in new properties. Do you have access to the accounts? Can you check the statements? Yes, I can log in online. Why? Because I want to know if the pattern of spending matches what Gerald was doing. If Preston's been financing her lifestyle the same way Gerald did. Vanessa pulled out her phone. Let me check right now. She logged into their bank account and started scrolling through recent transactions. I watched her face as she found things that clearly surprised or concerned her. There, she said, turning the phone toward me. Look at these charges. Jewelry stores, expensive restaurants, hotels, and not on dates when we've been traveling together. These are all when Preston claimed to be working late or on solo business trips. The pattern was identical to Gerald's spending. Expensive gifts, fancy dinners, hotel rooms. Vanessa, I think Sienna has been involved with both of them. With Gerald until he died, and with Preston ever since. But why? Vanessa's voice cracked. What does she want? I don't know yet. But I'm going to find out. This Saturday, at the dinner, I'm going to be watching her very carefully. And I need you to help me. How? Act normal. Don't let on that you suspect anything. I want to see how she behaves, how she interacts with Preston, whether she gives anything away. Can you do that? Vanessa wiped her eyes and sat up straighter. I saw something change in her expression, a hardening of resolve that reminded me of what I'd seen in my own mirror that morning. Yes, she said firmly. I can do that. Whatever you need, B. Because if this woman has destroyed our family, if she manipulated Gerald and is now manipulating Preston, she needs to face consequences. We spent the next hour making plans, comparing notes, piecing together a timeline of Sienna's involvement with our family. By the time we left the cafe, I had a much clearer picture of how she'd operated. She'd met Preston at the conference in Charlotte and quickly established herself as his business partner. She'd insinuated herself into family dinners and gatherings. She'd identified Gerald as vulnerable, a man approaching the end of his career, perhaps feeling his age, susceptible to the attention of a beautiful young woman. She'd seduced him, made him feel young and vital and special. She'd convinced him to spend money on her, to plan a future with her. And when he'd gotten sick, she'd stayed close, maintaining the affair even as he was dying. Then, when Gerald died, she'd simply transferred her attention fully to Preston. Same pattern, same manipulation, same goal. But what was the goal? Money seemed obvious, but if that was all she wanted, there were easier targets than a 75-year-old accountant and his middle-aged son. There had to be something more. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about Sienna's Facebook post from December. Sometimes you need to leave the past behind and build something new. What past was she leaving behind? And what was she trying to build? At 2 a.m., unable to stand the questions spinning in my mind any longer, I got up and went back to my computer. I tried searching for Sienna Whitmore, combined with various cities she might have lived in before Ashford Springs, Charlotte, Raleigh, Charleston. Nothing useful came up. Then I tried a different approach. I searched for news articles about real estate fraud, focusing on the Carolinas and Georgia. And that's when I found it. An article from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, dated 18 months ago. Local real estate agent accused of defrauding elderly investors. The article detailed how a woman named Sarah Williams had allegedly scammed several elderly clients out of their retirement savings by convincing them to invest in fake real estate developments. She disappeared before charges could be filed, and authorities were still searching for her. The article included a photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance at some business event, but the woman in the picture had auburn hair and striking features. It could have been Sienna. I stared at the photo for a long time, trying to be certain. The hair was styled differently, and the angle wasn't great, but the basic bone structure looked similar. Same high cheekbones, same wide-set eyes, same confident bearing. Sienna Whitmore might actually be Sarah Williams, a woman wanted for defrauding elderly people. And she'd targeted Gerald, an elderly man with retirement savings and assets, with the precision of someone who'd done this before. I printed out the article, my hands shaking. This changed everything. Sienna wasn't just a homewrecker or a gold digger. She was a professional con artist who specialized in exploiting elderly victims. And now she had her hooks in Preston, who controlled not just his own assets but likely had access to whatever inheritance Gerald had left. I checked Gerald's will, which I'd filed away after his death. He'd left everything to me, the house, his retirement accounts, his life insurance, everything. But he'd also set up a trust for Preston, to be distributed over several years for business investments. That trust was worth over $300,000. If Sienna was truly Sarah Williams, if she was a professional con artist, then that trust fund would be exactly the kind of target she'd be after. And Preston, convinced that Sienna was his business partner and possibly in love with her, would be the perfect mark to help her access it. I needed to verify that Sienna and Sarah were the same person. And I needed to do it before Saturday's dinner, before she could manipulate Preston into doing something that would give her access to that money. But how? I couldn't exactly ask her directly. And I didn't have any concrete proof, just a grainy photo and a strong suspicion. Then I remembered something. The article mentioned that Sarah Williams had a distinctive tattoo on her left shoulder blade, a phoenix rising from flames. Several of her victims had mentioned it. If I could see Sienna's shoulder, I could know for sure. And Saturday night's dinner at a fancy restaurant might just give me the opportunity one needed. I stayed up the rest of the night, planning. Not just for how to expose Sienna, but for how to protect my family from whatever damage she'd already done. Because one thing was clear, this woman had been systematically destroying the Thornhill family for nearly a year. She'd seduced my dying husband, possibly stolen money from him, and now she was targeting my son and his inheritance. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated the old widow. She'd thought I was too grief-stricken, too trusting, too naive to notice what was happening right under my nose. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. The days leading up to Saturday's dinner crawled by with agonizing slowness. I spent every waking moment preparing, planning, gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I printed out the Atlanta article about Sarah Williams. I made copies of the receipts from Gerald's hidden box. I documented the timeline of both affairs in meticulous detail. But more importantly, I made phone calls. On Thursday morning, I called the Atlanta Police Department and asked to speak with someone about the Sarah Williams case. After being transferred 3 times, I finally reached Detective Marcus Chen, the investigator who'd been assigned to the fraud case. "Mrs. Thornhill," he said after I'd explained who I was and why I was calling. "You think Sarah Williams is in North Carolina, using the name Sienna Whitmore?" "I believe so. The photo in the news article looks like her, though I can't be completely certain. But her pattern of behavior matches exactly, targeting elderly people, fabricating her background, insinuating herself into families to access assets. Do you have any concrete proof?" "The photo alone won't be enough for us to pursue charges." "Not yet. But she has a distinctive tattoo, according to your article. A phoenix on her left shoulder blade. I'm planning to verify that this Saturday." Detective Chen was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Thornhill, if this woman is who you think she is, she's dangerous. Not physically, necessarily, but she's sophisticated, manipulative, and she's left a trail of victims behind her. If you're right, you need to be very careful." "I understand. But detective, if I can confirm her identity, will you come to North Carolina? Will you pursue charges? If you can provide solid evidence that Sienna Whitmore is Sarah Williams, yes. We have multiple warrants for her arrest. But you need to be absolutely certain before we move forward." "I will be. By Sunday, I'll know for sure." After hanging up with Detective Chen, I called Vanessa. "Are you ready for tomorrow night?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the underlying tension. I've been going through more of Preston's financial records. It's worse than I thought. He's withdrawn over $50,000 in the past few months. Cash withdrawals, transfers to accounts I don't recognize. If she's scamming him the way she scammed Gerald. We're going to stop her, I said firmly. Tomorrow night, everything changes. Saturday arrived with crisp autumn weather, a cloudless blue sky and air that smelled of wood smoke and fallen leaves. It would have been a beautiful day under normal circumstances. Instead, my stomach was in knots, my hands trembling as I got dressed for dinner. I chose my outfit carefully, a dark green dress that Gerald had always loved, paired with the pearl necklace he'd given me on our 40th anniversary. I wanted to look dignified, strong, like someone who couldn't be dismissed or underestimated. I also packed a small bag with all my evidence, the photographs from Gerald's box, the receipts, the letters, the Atlanta article, and a small camera to document Sienna's tattoo if I could manage it. Bellissimo's was in downtown Ashford Springs, an upscale Italian restaurant that had opened the previous year. It was the kind of place Preston loved, expensive, sophisticated, with a wine list longer than the food menu. The kind of place where successful people went to be seen. I arrived exactly on time at 7 p.m. The hostess, a young woman with an immaculate smile, checked her reservation list. Thornhill party? You're the first to arrive. Right this way, please. She led me to a private dining room in the back, a space Preston had obviously reserved to make the evening feel special. The room had exposed brick walls, soft lighting from vintage Edison bulbs, and a long table already set for 6 with crisp white linens and gleaming silverware. 6 settings. Preston, Vanessa, the twins, Sienna, and me. One happy family, celebrating success. Except tonight, that illusion was going to shatter. I sat at the far end of the table where I could see everyone, and waited. Vanessa and the twins arrived next. Lily and Rose were beautiful in their matching blue dresses, their long dark hair styled in elegant updos that made them look older than 16. They hugged me warmly, chattering about school and friends, blissfully unaware of the storm about to break over their family. Vanessa met my eyes over her daughters' heads, and I saw the same determination I felt reflected back at me. She was ready. Preston arrived 10 minutes later with Sienna on his arm. My son looked happy, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. He wore an expensive charcoal suit with a burgundy tie, and his smile was genuine as he greeted us. Sorry we're late. Last-minute business call. But I barely noticed Preston. All my attention was on Sienna. She was stunning, as always. Her auburn hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, and she wore a sophisticated black dress with a plunging back that showed a significant amount of skin. Diamond earrings caught the light, and her smile was warm and confident as she made her way around the table, greeting everyone. Beatrice, she said, kissing my cheek with practiced affection. You look wonderful. I love that dress on you. Thank you, Sienna. I kept my voice pleasant, neutral. You look lovely as well. That's quite a striking dress. Oh, this old thing? She laughed, running her hand along the fabric. Preston insisted I wear something special for our big celebration. Preston, who was helping seat the twins, beamed at her. Only the best for my business partner. This deal we closed is going to transform the company. We're talking about a 20% increase in revenue over the next 2 years. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Vanessa said, and only I could hear the slight edge in her voice. You must have worked very hard. We both did, Preston said, sitting down next to Sienna. I honestly couldn't have done it without her. She's brilliant with negotiations, with building relationships. She made this deal happen. I watched Sienna throughout this exchange, studying her expressions, her body language. She played the role perfectly, modest but proud, supportive but accomplished, the ideal business partner. She laughed at Preston's jokes, included everyone in the conversation, and seemed genuinely delighted to be celebrating with the family. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have thought she was wonderful. The waiter arrived to take our drink orders, and Preston insisted on ordering champagne. "Tonight, we celebrate," he announced. "To Thornhill Development Group and our incredible future." The champagne arrived, and we all raised our glasses for the toast. As Sienna lifted her glass, I noticed something, a slight shift in how she held her arm that caused her dress to slip just a fraction. And there, on her left shoulder blade, partially visible beneath the fabric, was the edge of a tattoo. I couldn't see the whole thing, but I could see enough, a hint of red and orange, the curve of what might be a wing. A phoenix. My heart began to race. It was her. Sienna Whitmore was Sarah Williams. Through dinner, I forced myself to act normal, to participate in the conversation, to smile and laugh at appropriate moments. But I was watching, always watching. Watching how Sienna touched Preston's arm when she spoke to him. Watching how Vanessa's smile never quite reached her eyes. Watching my granddaughters, innocent and happy, unaware that the woman sitting across from them was a predator. The evidence was burning in my purse beneath the table. The revelations were burning on my tongue. But I needed the right moment. I needed everyone together, focused, unable to escape or deflect. That moment came during dessert. Preston stood, champagne glass in hand, his face flushed with wine and happiness. "I want to make another toast," he said. "Not just to business, but to family. To Mom, who raised me to be ambitious and hardworking. To Vanessa and the girls, who support me unconditionally. And to Sienna, who's become like family over these past months. Like family." The words made me want to scream. "Actually," I said, setting down my fork with deliberate care, "speaking of family, there's something I need to discuss with everyone." The table went quiet. Preston looked at me with mild confusion. "Mom? What is it?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila folder I'd brought. "I found something this week while going through your father's things. Something that concerns all of us." Sienna's expression flickered, just for a moment, so quickly that someone not watching for it might have missed it. But I saw it. Fear, calculation, the immediate assessment of threat. Vanessa said gently, playing her part perfectly, "Maybe this isn't the best time." "No," I interrupted. "This is exactly the right time. Because what I discovered involves everyone at this table." I opened the folder and pulled out the photograph, the one that had started everything, the picture of Sienna in the hotel room, looking seductive and confident. I placed it face up on the table. Preston looked at it, confused. Vanessa's face showed carefully staged shock. The twins leaned forward to see, then quickly looked away, embarrassed. But Sienna went absolutely still. "That's..." Preston started, then trailed off, unable to form words. "That's a photograph I found in your father's Bible," I said calmly. "Hidden there, along with dozens of others. Along with love letters. Along with receipts from hotels and restaurants and jewelry stores." The silence was deafening. "I don't understand," Preston said, looking between the photo and me. "This is Sienna. Why would Dad have a picture of..." He stopped as the realization hit him. No, that's not possible. "Your father and Sienna were having an affair," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions roiling inside me. "From January through May of this year. They met twice a week at the Grandview Inn in Copper Ridge. He spent thousands of dollars on her. He was planning to leave me to marry her." "That's insane." Preston's voice rose. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. You're grieving, you're confused." "I'm not confused." I pulled out more evidence, the receipts, the letters, the timeline I'd created. "It's all here. Documented, verified. I spoke to the hotel staff. I checked the credit card statements. Your father had a 6-month affair with this woman, right up until 3 weeks before he died." All eyes turned to Sienna. She sat perfectly still, her face an unreadable mask. "Sienna," Preston said, his voice breaking. "Tell her this is crazy. Tell her it's not true." Sienna took a slow sip of her champagne, then set the glass down with careful precision. When she looked up, her expression had changed completely. The warmth was gone, replaced by cold calculation. "Does it matter?" she said quietly. The question hung in the air like poison. "Does it matter?" Preston repeated incredulously. "Of course it matters. She's saying you had an affair with my father." "Your father was dying," Sienna said, her voice eerily calm. "He was desperate to feel alive one more time. I gave him that gift. I made his final months meaningful." Vanessa gasped. "You're admitting it?" "Why shouldn't I?" Sienna leaned back in her chair, perfectly composed. "Gerald knew what he was doing. He pursued me, actually. After we met at one of Preston's business dinners, he started calling me, inviting me to coffee, telling me how beautiful and intelligent I was. He was the one who wanted the affair. He was my husband." The words exploded out of me. "He was a man who felt invisible in his own life," Sienna countered. "You treated him like furniture, Beatrice. When was the last time you told him he was attractive? When was the last time you made him feel desired?" The cruelty of it took my breath away. She was blaming me for Gerald's betrayal, rewriting history to make herself the victim. "Mom," Preston said, his face ashen, "I swear I didn't know. I had no idea they were." "I know you didn't," I said gently. Then I turned back to Sienna. "But there's more, isn't there? Because Gerald wasn't your first elderly victim." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out the Atlanta article and placed it on the table next to the photograph. "Sarah Williams. Wanted in Georgia for defrauding elderly investors. The article includes a photo that looks remarkably like you. And it mentions a distinctive tattoo, a phoenix on the left shoulder blade." I saw Preston's eyes flick to Sienna's shoulder, where the edge of the tattoo was visible. "That's ridiculous," Sienna said, but her voice had lost its confidence. "Lots of people have phoenix tattoos." "True," I agreed. "But not everyone named Sarah Williams is wanted for fraud. Not everyone fabricates their entire professional history." I checked, Sienna. Westmont College doesn't exist. The companies you claim to work for have no record of you. Everything about your background is a lie. You've been investigating me?" For the first time, genuine anger flashed across her face. "After I found evidence that you'd seduced my dying husband?" "Yes, I investigated. And I found out exactly what you are, a con artist who targets elderly people, gains their trust, and steals their money." Preston had his phone out now, clearly searching for the Atlanta article. I watched his face as he found it, as he compared the photo to Sienna, as understanding dawned. "Oh my God," he whispered. "It's true. It's all true." "Preston," Sienna reached for his hand, but he jerked away. "Did you steal from my father?" he demanded. "Is that what this was about? The affair, getting close to our family, were you trying to steal from him?" "Your father gave me gifts willingly," Sienna said. "Just like you have." The admission hung there, devastating in its implications. "What?" Vanessa's voice was sharp. "Preston, what is she talking about?" Preston couldn't meet his wife's eyes. There were some business expenses. Investments that Sienna suggested. $50,000, Vanessa said flatly. "I found the withdrawals." $50,000 in 3 months, Preston. For what? For her. It was for business. For property investments that were supposed to. He stopped, realization crashing over him. "There are no properties, are there? You never invested that money. You just took it." Sienna stood up, her composure finally cracking. "You gave me that money for legitimate business purposes. If you made poor investment choices, that's not my fault. You manipulated him." I stood as well, years of suppressed rage finally breaking free. "Just like you manipulated Gerald. Just like you've manipulated countless others. You're a predator who targets vulnerable people and destroys families." "I provided a service," Sienna hissed. Gerald was dying and miserable. I made him happy. Preston was bored in his marriage. Don't, Vanessa cut her off, standing now too. Don't you dare blame us for your lies. The twins were crying now, confused and frightened by the confrontation exploding around them. I felt terrible for them, for having to witness this, but they needed to see the truth about what Sienna really was. I'm calling the police, Preston said, his hands shaking as he dialed. On what charges? Sienna's voice turned icy. Gerald and I had a consensual relationship. The money he spent on me was his to spend. Same with Preston, every dollar he gave me was voluntary. You can't prove fraud. The Atlanta police would disagree, I said. I spoke with Detective Chen on Thursday. He's very interested in finding Sarah Williams. And now I can tell him exactly where she is. For the first time, real fear crossed Sienna's face. She grabbed her purse and coat. You people are delusional. I've done nothing wrong. You destroyed my family, I said quietly. You seduced my dying husband. You stole from my son. You tore apart my granddaughter's sense of security. That's more than wrong, it's evil. Sienna laughed, but it was hollow. Your family was already broken, Beatrice. I just exposed the cracks. Gerald was a weak old man desperate to feel young. Preston is a fool who thinks with his wallet instead of his brain. I didn't destroy your family, they destroyed themselves. She headed for the door, but Preston moved to block her path. You're not leaving until the police get here. Move, Sienna snarled. No. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Sienna's expression shifted one final time, becoming something cold and calculating that I suspect was closer to her true self than anything we'd seen before. Fine, she said. I'll wait for the police. But when they get here, I'll tell them exactly what kind of man Gerald Thornhill really was. How he pursued a woman 40 years younger than him. How he was planning to abandon his wife and family. How he begged me to love him. Is that really the legacy you want for your husband, Beatrice? The threat was clear: if I pursued this, she'd destroy Gerald's memory completely. But I'd already made my peace with the truth about Gerald. I'd already mourned the man I thought he was and accepted the reality of who he'd actually been. Tell them whatever you want, I said. The truth is going to come out either way. At least now, people will know what you are. The police arrived 15 minutes later. I'd called Detective Chen from the restroom while we waited, giving him Sienna's current location. He'd contacted the local Ashford Springs police, who showed up with remarkable speed. The restaurant had cleared out. The manager had quietly asked the other patrons to leave when it became obvious something serious was happening. Now it was just our family, Sienna, 2 officers, and the wreckage of everything we thought we knew. Officer Sarah Martinez took statements from all of us while her partner, Officer James, kept watch over Sienna, who sat in stony silence, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. I showed them all the evidence, the photographs, letters, receipts, the Atlanta article, everything I'd compiled. I explained how I'd discovered the affair, how I'd investigated Sienna's background, how I'd connected her to Sarah Williams. I'll need to verify all of this with the Atlanta PD, Officer Martinez said. But Mrs. Thornhill, this is impressive investigative work. Most people wouldn't have put this together. Most people weren't as motivated as I was, I replied. They arrested Sienna, or Sarah Williams, as they now called her, on an outstanding warrant from Georgia. As they led her out in handcuffs, she looked back at our family one last time. You're all hypocrites, she said. Gerald and Preston both knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted me. They paid for me. I just gave them what they wanted. You gave them lies, I said. And now you'll face the consequences. After she was gone, our family sat in the empty dining room, surrounded by the ruins of our celebration dinner. The champagne had gone flat. The dessert sat untouched. Everything we'd thought we were celebrating had turned to ash. Preston broke first. He put his head in his hands and started to sob. I'm so sorry, he choked out. I'm so sorry for everything. For being stupid, for being blind, for letting her into our lives. Vanessa moved to his side, and after a moment's hesitation, put her hand on his shoulder. We'll deal with this, she said quietly. But Preston, you need to understand, our marriage can't survive more lies. If there's anything else I need to know, you need to tell me now. There's nothing else, he swore. I never had an affair with her. I swear to God. I thought she was just my business partner. I thought, his voice broke. I thought I was being smart, bringing her into the company. I thought I was making good business decisions. But she played me. She played all of us. She did, I agreed. But Preston, you made choices too. You withdrew $50,000 without discussing it with Vanessa. You spent time with Sienna that should have been spent with your family. You can't blame everything on her. He nodded miserably. I know. I know I screwed up. The twins sat close together, holding hands, their earlier joy completely extinguished. Lily, always the more outspoken of the two, finally spoke up. Grandma, was Grandpa really going to leave you for her? The question pierced my heart. I don't know, sweetheart. He was sick, possibly not thinking clearly. People do strange things when they're facing death. Do you hate him now? Rose asked softly. I thought about it for a long moment. Did I hate Gerald? I'd certainly hated his choices, his betrayal, his weakness. But hate him? No, I said finally. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I feel betrayed. But 47 years of marriage can't be erased by one terrible mistake. Your grandfather was a good man who made a very bad choice. I can be angry about that and still love the man he was for most of our life together. How do you do that? Vanessa asked. How do you forgive something like that? I'm not sure I have forgiven it, I admitted. But I've accepted it. And I've decided that Sienna, Sarah, whoever she is, she doesn't get to define Gerald's entire life. Yes, he betrayed me. Yes, he was planning to leave. But he also raised a son, provided for his family, served his community, and loved us in his own flawed way for decades. That has to count for something. We sat in silence for a while, each processing in our own way. Finally, Preston spoke. What happens now? Now, I said, we rebuild. We face the truth about what happened. We deal with the financial damage. Vanessa, you and Preston need to decide if your marriage can survive this. The girls need support to process everything they've learned. And I paused. I need to decide how to remember Gerald. How to honor what was good while acknowledging what was broken. Will she go to prison? Lily asked. I hope so. Detective Chin said she scammed multiple elderly people in Atlanta out of their retirement savings. If they can prove the fraud charges, she could face significant prison time. Good, Rose said fiercely. She deserves it. We left the restaurant together, a family fractured but not completely broken. The celebration we'd planned had turned into a reckoning, but perhaps that's what we'd needed all along. Over the next few weeks, the truth came out in painful layers. Detective Chin arrived from Atlanta, and his investigation revealed that Sarah Williams, Sienna Whitmore, had been running similar cons across the Southeast for years. Gerald had been just one of many elderly victims she'd targeted. The Atlanta authorities charged her with multiple counts of fraud, theft, and elder abuse. Her trial was scheduled for the following spring. Preston and Vanessa entered marriage counseling. It was difficult, painful work, but they were both committed to trying to save their relationship. Preston had to face his own culpability, not in the affair, but in the poor choices he'd made, the family time he'd sacrificed, the money he'd lost to Sienna's manipulation. The twins needed therapy too, struggling to understand how someone who'd seemed so nice could be so cruel. But they were resilient, and with support, they began to heal. As for me, I spent long hours in Gerald's study, reading through his journals and papers, trying to understand the man he'd been and the choices he'd made. I found entries from the months before he'd gotten sick, frustrations about aging, fears about retirement, worries that his life had been too small, too ordinary. I could see how Sienna had exploited those vulnerabilities. She'd made him feel special, vital, desired. She'd promised him a second chance at youth and passion. It didn't excuse what he'd done. But it helped me understand it. I also found a letter he'd written but never sent, dated 3 days before his diagnosis. Dear B, I need to talk to you about something I've done. Something terrible that I'm deeply ashamed of. I've been unfaithful. There's a woman named Sienna, and I've been seeing her for several months. I thought I wanted to leave you for her, but now I realize what a fool I've been. You are the love of my life. You've been my partner, my companion, my anchor for 47 years. How could I have risked losing you for the excitement of something new? I'm going to end it with Sienna. I'm going to tell her it's over. And then I'm going to spend the rest of my life making this up to you, showing you how much you mean to me, being the husband you deserve. I hope you can forgive me. I hope we can find our way back to each other. I love you, B. I always have, and I always will. Gerald. He'd never sent the letter. A week after writing it, he'd gotten his diagnosis, and everything had changed. Maybe he'd planned to tell me after his treatment, if he survived. Maybe he'd decided to take the secret to his grave. I'd never know for sure. But the letter changed something in me. It didn't erase the betrayal or heal the hurt. But it showed me that Gerald had wrestled with his choices, had recognized his mistake, had wanted to come back to me. The cancer had stolen his chance to make things right. Sienna had exploited his weakness until the very end. But this letter, unfinished and unsent, showed me that somewhere inside the man who'd betrayed me was still the man I'd loved. And that was enough to begin the process of forgiveness. 6 months later, I stood in the garden Gerald had loved, watching spring flowers push through the soil. The dogwoods were blooming, painting the yard in white and pink. New life emerging from what had seemed dead and barren. Sienna, Sarah Williams, had been convicted on multiple fraud charges and sentenced to 12 years in prison. Detective Chen had called to tell me personally, thanking me for the evidence that had helped build the case against her. You saved other people from being victimized, he'd said. Because of your investigation, we were able to connect her to 6 other cases across 3 states. You did something really important, Mrs. Thornhill. Preston's company had survived, though it took significant restructuring and financial recovery. He'd become more present at home, more engaged with Vanessa and the girls. The marriage was healing, slowly but steadily. The twins had decided to write about their experience for a school project on con artists and how to recognize manipulation tactics. They'd turned their trauma into education, helping others avoid similar situations. And me? I'd started volunteering at a senior center, teaching workshops on financial protection for elderly people. I shared Gerald's story, with permission from the family, to help others recognize warning signs of scams and exploitation. I'd turned our family's pain into purpose. I still missed Gerald. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies, I missed the man I'd loved for 47 years. But I'd learned that people are complicated, that good people can make terrible choices, and that love can coexist with hurt and forgiveness. I'd also learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. At 70 years old, when I'd thought my life was winding down, I discovered reserves of courage and determination I didn't know I possessed. I'd investigated a crime. I'd protected my family. I'd brought a predator to justice. I was Beatrice Thornhill, widow, mother, grandmother, and survivor. And I was done being underestimated. As I stood in that garden, feeling the warm spring sun on my face, I thought about the photograph that had started everything, the image that had fallen from Gerald's Bible and shattered my world. That photograph had revealed terrible truths. But it had also revealed my own strength. And for that, in a strange way, I was grateful. Because sometimes we have to see the worst in people, and in ourselves, before we can truly appreciate what we're capable of overcoming. My family would never be the same. The innocence was gone, the trust forever altered. But we were still here. Still standing. still fighting to rebuild something better from the ruins of what had been destroyed. And that was its own kind of triumph.